What Patton did when he found a letter on a dead German soldier. March 1945. The road into Germany was no longer a road at all. It was a strip of churned mud, splintered wagons, dead horses, burned half-tracks, and bodies lying in the cold, like dropped uniforms, no one had come back to claim. General George S. Patton stood beside his jeep in a pearl-handled pistol belt, polished helmet, and high riding boots that were now thick with black earth. The men around him had seen him curse artillery officers, laugh under shell fire, and drive forward when decent men would have stayed low. But on that morning, in the gray silence after a short, vicious fight, they saw him stop over a dead German soldier and go still. The body was young, too young, a field gray tunic, a dispatch satchel, one glove missing, blood frozen dark across the chest. Patton nudged the satchel with his boot, bent down, and pulled out a folded letter wrapped in wax paper inside the soldier's jacket. At first, the officers beside him thought it might be orders, a map, something useful for the next attack. Patton handed it to an interpreter. The man opened it carefully, scanned the first lines, and then looked up in a way that made everyone wait. It was not a military message. It was from the boy's father. And when Patton heard what it said, he did something none of the men with him expected. He did not toss it away. He did not sneer. He did not walk on. He looked toward the town ahead, where more Germans were still dug in among church walls and stone houses, and he gave an order that changed the next few hours of the war for both sides. By the spring of 1945, George Patton was already a legend, and already a problem. That was the strange thing about him. Even in victory, he never fit cleanly into anybody's frame. To the newspapers back home, he was the charging American warlord, with ivory-handled pistols, a hard face, a profanity for every occasion, and a gift for saying the exact thing that made staff officers nervous. To his men, he was both admired and feared. He demanded polished helmets, clean leggings, sharp salutes, hard movement, and no excuses. He believed a commander belonged as close to danger as possible, where mud, noise, and death stripped away all false reports. And to the Germans, even before they had seen him, Patton had become something worse than a general. He had become an idea: speed, suddenness, armor appearing where it should not be, a front collapsing because one man on the other side refused to let it settle. He had been forged in North Africa, burned in Sicily, almost wrecked by his own temper after the slapping scandal, and then brought back because the American army needed what he could do more than it feared what he might say. He was not easy to control, but he was impossible to ignore. When the great German blow came in the Ardennes in December 1944, Patton had done what even senior Allied commanders struggled to believe could be done. He pivoted the Third Army north through winter roads and relieved Bastogne. That one act did not win the war by itself, but it stamped something permanent onto Patton's name. He could see a battlefield move before it moved. He could sense where the enemy was brittle, and once he smelled weakness, he did not politely wait for events to unfold. He hit. By March, the war in the West looked almost finished on maps. But maps lied. On maps, Germany was shrinking. In real life, Germany still had rivers, ridgelines, fortified towns, broken bridges, desperate officers, SS fanatics, teenage boys with Panzerfausts, and fathers who knew the war was lost but could not reach their sons before the state did. Patton understood that end-stage wars were often the ugliest. A winning army grew careless. A losing army grew strange. Whole units dissolved while other pockets fought with suicidal stubbornness. Civilians started peeking from cellars with white rags, while party loyalists shot deserters behind barns and told boys to die for villages that would be abandoned before sunset. Patton's Third Army had been grinding and lunging across eastern France and Luxembourg, through Lorraine, over rivers, around strong points, toward the German frontier. There had been delays, arguments, shortages, and hard, ugly battles that never became legends because they were too muddy and costly to look heroic in photographs. But by early 1945, the balance had shifted. German reserves were draining away. Fuel and transport were failing. Allied air power owned the sky. American artillery could erase whole tree lines. Patton knew it. More important, he knew the Germans knew it too. The question was not whether the enemy was beaten in the long run. The question was how much killing would happen before they admitted it. That question was burning through Patton's mind in the days before he found the letter. He wanted the Rhine. He wanted it badly, almost personally. Not because the river itself had mystical power, though armies had treated it that way for centuries, but because it was the last great natural shield before the heart of Germany opened. To cross it fast was to prove that the enemy was done. To cross it before certain rivals made a theatrical show of it was even better. Patton rarely confessed jealousy in delicate language. He preferred action to commentary. If another commander planned a grand set-piece crossing with perfect ceremony, Patton wanted to be across first, with less fuss and more dust. But to get there, he had to help clear the western approaches, break what was left of German resistance in the Rhineland, and keep the momentum that was his greatest weapon. Momentum was not just speed. It was a kind of violence done to the enemy's nervous system. A retreating army might survive. A confused army might regroup, but an army forced to make decisions too quickly, under pressure, with roads blocked, radios failing, and headquarters losing touch with reality, that army began to disintegrate. Patton understood this better than most Allied commanders. He hunted not only divisions, he hunted coherence. And that is why he never liked sitting back. Staff officers would spread maps on tables. Intelligence men would mark roads, bridges, ridgelines, and likely reserves. Artillery officers would discuss timing and ammunition. Air liaison officers would talk weather windows and targets. Patton listened. He valued intelligence far more than his public image suggested. He could be theatrical, but he was not random. He trusted officers who told him unpleasant truths, especially if they could prove them. Still, after the talk was done, he wanted to see. He wanted the smell of the ground, the slope of the fields, the width of the roads, the faces of the men, the look in the eyes of prisoners, the direction of smoke, the kind of silence hanging over a village after shelling. Those things never fit neatly into reports, but Patton believed wars were often decided by what reports missed. The road where he found the dead German was somewhere in that restless space between briefing room certainty and battlefield truth. The fighting that morning had not been a major battle by the standards of the war. No grand name would be carved into marble because of it. It was the kind of local clash that filled the last months of the campaign in the West. An American armored push, probing through damaged country, German rear guards trying to slow it, brief firefights around crossroads, a house on fire, machine gun bursts from an orchard wall, mortars walking across a field, a few men dead before noon, then a sudden silence that made everything feel temporary and unfinished. Patton had come forward to inspect the route and judge how hard the next town might fight. The Germans ahead were believed to be a mix of regular army survivors, Volksgrenadiers, local militia, and perhaps a cadre of SS men enforcing discipline from behind. In late-war Germany, that combination was dangerous. Men who wanted to live might surrender. Men who feared the SS more than the Americans might not. The dead soldier lay near a broken cart beside a shallow ditch. He looked like a courier. There was a dispatch satchel slung over one shoulder, mud sprayed up one side of the tunic, and a pistol still holstered. Not looted yet, not searched carefully. Perhaps the fight had moved too fast. Perhaps the Americans nearby assumed intelligence men would deal with him later. Patton saw him while stepping around a shattered bicycle. There were several things Patton always noticed first on dead men: boots, gear arrangement, weapon condition, hands. A battlefield told its own story if someone knew how to read it. A man with clean boots in a mud fight meant recent movement or staff duty. A rifle with a full magazine suggested he died before firing much. Hands blackened with grease could mean vehicle crew. Hands soft, almost boyish, sometimes meant training had run out before experience began. This one, Patton thought immediately, had not been in the field long. He crouched, ignoring the protests of an aide who hated seeing the army commander kneel in exposed ground. Patton opened the tunic. There, tucked into an inner pocket inside wax paper, was the letter. An interpreter was called over, not because Patton could not guess what a private letter might be, but because he wanted the exact words. Exact words mattered. They always did. Armies ran on orders, and nations bled from phrases. One sentence could explain more about morale than 50 captured rifles. The interpreter unfolded the paper. The handwriting was tight, old-fashioned, not a rushed military hand. It had been written by someone older, someone careful, someone trying not to waste paper. The opening was simple, "My dear son." Then came lines about home, the winter, shortages, the church bell no longer ringing, the mother being ill, the air raids, the neighbor boy missing in the east. Patton listened with the remote face he wore when he was concentrating. Then the interpreter slowed down, reading the next passage more quietly. The father wrote that the war was lost, not might be lost, not difficult, lost. He wrote that the radio lied. He wrote that party officials still shouted about final victory, while the town buried boys and old men. He wrote that if his son was ordered to hold a street for no purpose, he should think of God before Hitler, of home before slogans, of life before any oath demanded by madmen. If the Americans came, the father wrote, and if there was a chance to live, then live. Throw away your rifle if you must. No field, no bridge, no officer can be worth a mother's grave and a father's last son. The interpreter stopped. Nobody around Patton moved. Men who had heard him curse out colonels and praise tank crews in the same breath now watched his face for a sign of anger, contempt, or mockery. He gave none of them what they expected. He reached for the letter himself, skimmed the German lines, then looked past the dead courier toward the town ahead. There are moments in war when information becomes more than information. It becomes a pressure point. The letter told Patton something no aerial photograph could tell him. The Germans in the next town might still shoot. They might still mine roads and blow bridges and force Americans to pay for every 100 yards. But inside Germany itself, inside homes, kitchens, churches, and family tables, the truth had arrived before the surrender had. Fathers knew. Mothers knew. Neighbors knew. The only people still pretending this could end well were the men who had too much blood behind them to survive honesty. Patton stood up and asked the first question. Who is holding the town? The intelligence officer gave the best current estimate. A fragment of a Volksgrenadier regiment, some local defenders, possible SS detachment, civilians still inside, unknown number. Patton asked the second question. How much artillery have we already planned to put into the center? The artilleryman named the fires scheduled for the opening phase. Patton asked a third. Can we cut the roads east and north before they know we're around them? The armored commander said yes, if he moved immediately and if the ground near the orchard lane held the tanks. Patton stared toward the church tower barely visible over blackened rooftops. Then he did something that would have sounded sentimental if said by a gentler man, but from Patton it landed like a tactical decision carved in stone. He ordered the attack changed, not canceled, not softened into charity, changed. He wanted armor around the flanks fast. He wanted the exits blocked. He wanted artillery shifted away from the heart of the town and onto the outer strong points, road junctions, and likely anti-tank positions. He wanted loudspeakers, if any could be brought forward, interpreters ready, and any psychological warfare leaflets still on hand, adapted with a blunt message. The war is lost. Your own fathers know it. Surrender and live. He wanted prisoners separated quickly so regular army men could not be bullied by SS cadre. And most of all, he wanted speed. No slow-chewing fight house by house, if fear could do the work faster than shells. Some officers blinked. This was not softness. It was a ruthless form of economy. Patton was not sparing Germans because he had become tender. He was sparing Americans because he believed the enemy's will was cracking, and because dead American infantry in alleys would buy him nothing. In his mind, the letter was not merely a private tragedy. It was proof. Germany's inner collapse could be used like artillery if one knew where to strike. Still, the surprise remained. Men had expected Patton to glance at the letter and dismiss it. Instead, He treated it as a battlefield document. Personal, yes. Emotional, yes. But useful. In Patton's world, usefulness often decided everything. He ordered a copy made of the letter before anything else happened to it. Intelligence would get the text. Psychological warfare would get the key lines. Then he folded the original carefully and put it back inside the wax paper. One aide later remembered the odd tenderness of the motion. Not softness, not pity exactly, just precision. Patton handled it the way he might handle a map that mattered. As engines revved and runners moved, the story of the letter spread through the nearby command group. That was another thing Patton understood instinctively. Information changed morale not only on the enemy side but on his own. American soldiers pushing into Germany in 1945 were tired of killing for villages whose names they could not pronounce. They had seen too many surprises to trust easy optimism. But hearing that a German father had told his own son to surrender, that did something. It did not make the war safe. It did not make the next street less dangerous. What it did was shift the feeling in men's chests. The enemy in front of them was still armed, still capable of murder, still able to kill a friend in an instant. But now there was a crack in the image of endless resistance. Behind the firing loopholes and uniform collars stood a nation that no longer believed its own speeches. The American columns moved. To understand why Patton's order mattered, it helps to understand how towns died in 1945. A town did not simply surrender or resist. It broke in layers. First came rumor, then the mayor whispering one thing while the local party leaders screamed another. Then the army officers deciding whether retreat was still possible. Then the SS or fanatical loyalists threatening anyone who suggested white flags. Then civilians hiding heirlooms in cellars and telling children not to speak. Then shells landing near the edge of town, enough to make everyone believe the whole place might vanish in an hour. If there was still a road open, practical men looked for it. If there was not, they started bargaining with fear. The town ahead of Patton was in exactly that state. The dead courier had likely been trying to move messages between scattered elements as the line bent and cracked. Without radios working well and with vehicles lost or out of fuel, men like him became the nervous system of a dying army. He had carried not only orders but a father's truth. He never made it. Patton did. As the American armor swung around the flanks, infantry followed in half-tracks and on foot, cutting across fields still wet from thaw. Engineers checked for mines. Forward observers found steeples and chimneys from which German spotters might direct mortar fire. Artillery shifted onto the edges, smashing likely anti-tank nests and ridge positions from which anyone might cover an escape. The center of town was not spared because of mercy. It was spared because Patton wanted it taken intact enough for fear to keep working inside it. If he shattered everything at once, every surviving German with a rifle might feel cornered. If he trapped them and let the truth spread, many would decide on their own that dying for the rubble was insanity. Loudspeakers came up later than Patton wanted, but interpreters went first. Under covering fire, messages were shouted down roads and over walls. Lay down your weapons. Your situation is hopeless. You will be treated fairly. Regular army soldiers will not be harmed if they surrender at once. More pointed still, using the spirit of the captured letter, without exposing the dead courier by name, the Americans called out that Germany's own families knew the war was over. That line mattered. It cut deeper than threats. Threats could harden pride. Shame and homesickness loosened it. At first, nothing happened. Then a single white cloth appeared from a second-story window and vanished so quickly that some American soldiers thought they had imagined it. Minutes later, 2 German soldiers emerged from behind a bakery with hands up. They were old enough to shave but looked starved and frightened. One kept turning his head, as if expecting to be shot in the back by his own side. When questioned, they confirmed what Patton had suspected. The town held a mixture of men. Some wanted out. Some had already hidden civilian coats in case they could slip away. But an SS sergeant and a few hard men had sworn to hang anyone who surrendered. One local official had already been beaten for suggesting negotiation. That was enough for Patton. He sent the armored screen tighter around the exits and ordered a concentrated strike not on the town square, but on the building believed to house the holdout leadership. This was classic Patton in a way few outsiders appreciated. He liked violence, yes, but he liked directed violence better than waste. Once he identified the true center of resistance, he wanted it crushed quickly. Let the weak surrender, break the hard core, keep moving. Mortars and tank guns tore into the suspected command post. Smoke boiled from the roof. Machine gun fire answered from upper windows. American infantry worked forward under cover, kicking through garden walls and shell holes. Somewhere near the church, a German anti-tank team knocked out the lead scout vehicle, and for a few tense minutes, the whole approach threatened to bog down into the kind of bloody alley fight Patton hated. He came farther forward than his staff wanted, binoculars up, taking in the angles, asking who had seen the flash, ordering another tank around the side street to rake the position. Then came the turn. Not a dramatic white flag procession down the main street. End-stage towns rarely collapsed that neatly. Instead, collapse came as a series of little betrayals against fanaticism. A cellar door opened and 3 soldiers surrendered. A medic crossed with a Red Cross armband and asked for permission to remove wounded. A local policeman appeared shaking, unarmed, saying the SS men had pulled back toward the schoolhouse. A hidden machine gun fell silent because its crew had slipped out the back. At the edge of town, several defenders tried to flee and ran straight into Patton's blocking armor. Inside less than 2 hours, what had looked like a possible day-long fight began to unravel. American troops entering the outer streets found exactly the moral split the letter had predicted. In one courtyard lay 3 German soldiers, shot at close range from behind. Their rifles were stacked nearby, untouched. One still had a white cloth tied around his sleeve. Whether they had tried to surrender or simply hesitated, nobody could say for certain. But every American who saw them knew what it meant. The SS did not need everyone loyal. They only needed everyone afraid. Patton had sensed that. Now he had proof. When this report reached him, his face hardened in a way aides recognized. Whatever professional respect he sometimes spoke of for the fighting quality of the German army, it stopped cold when coercion, massacre, or pointless cruelty appeared. He did not become more sentimental. He became colder. He ordered the schoolhouse position reduced immediately and without delicacy. If there were still fanatics inside forcing the fight, they would not be bargained with. The tanks hit the facade. Infantry stormed through smoke and broken plaster. The surviving holdouts were killed or dragged out stunned and bleeding. Among the dead was an SS non-commissioned officer with a pistol and a rope in his satchel. The image passed quickly through the Americans. Rope. Enough said. The town was taken. For the men who fought through it, the victory did not feel grand. It felt tired. Smoke drifted through roofless rooms. The civilians emerged with pale faces. A priest crossed himself over a doorway blackened by fire. A cow stood tied behind a damaged shed, as if no war had happened at all. Medics worked both sides where they found them. Some German prisoners looked relieved enough to cry. Others looked ashamed. A few stared with the blank, punished eyes of men whose beliefs had collapsed before their bodies did. Patton entered after the firing had mostly died. He was always at his most dangerous emotionally when a place had just fallen. Victory energized him, but signs of wasted life angered him. He wanted to know how long it took, what routes had worked, where resistance had centered, how many Americans were down, whether the bridge on the far side was still usable, and whether the prisoners had said anything of value. Yet amid those practical questions, the letter was still in his mind. He asked again about the dead courier. The body had been brought in from the road and laid with other German dead near the edge of town. Personal effects were being sorted. Patton went to see him. The interpreter came too. There is something important here about Patton that gets lost under all the stories of swagger. He was not a soft-hearted man, but he was not numb. He thought about death constantly. He thought about glory, destiny, ancient warriors, reincarnation, and the strange idea that battle revealed, rather than created, what a man truly was. He could talk brutally about casualties and still feel the private force of a single death if it touched some nerve of meaning. A dead courier carrying his father's plea from a collapsing home touched exactly that nerve. It was war in miniature. State against family. Obedience against survival. Public madness against private truth. Patton stood over the body and asked whether any name had been found. It had. The tag identified the soldier as 19 years old. 19. Old enough to kill, young enough for the word boy to still hang over him whether anyone liked it or not. The interpreter reread the final lines of the letter. They were the strongest and simplest. If you can come home, come home. If you cannot come home, then at least do not die for men who have already lied to us about everything. Patton said nothing for several seconds. Then he gave another unexpected order. Make 2 copies, one for G2, one for psychological warfare. Then he tapped the original letter with a gloved finger. This goes back with him until we find where it belongs. The staff understood. If a local registry, prisoner statement, or captured documents later revealed the father's address, the letter would be returned, or at least preserved with the soldier's effects. This was not a broad humanitarian policy. It was one specific order for one specific letter, because Patton believed it mattered, maybe as evidence, maybe as a symbol, maybe because in a war of giant numbers he still knew when one folded piece of paper said more than 100 communiques. As the day went on, word of the event spread farther than the morning staff group. Stories always changed in retelling, especially around famous commanders. By nightfall, some men said Patton had read the German himself in perfect understanding. Others said he had cursed Hitler and taken off his gloves in anger. Still others claimed he had ordered the whole town spared because of the letter. None of that was exactly right, but the truth underneath the rumor was powerful enough. Patton had found the enemy's private truth on a dead man and used it faster than the enemy could. That was something soldiers respected. The larger campaign did not stop because of one letter. Patton's army kept moving. Roads filled with prisoners. Bridges were seized or bridged. Columns pushed eastward through cities and farm country that had been told for years that total war would make them stronger, and now learned that total war only made the end louder. The Third Army continued to exploit openings with the speed Patton loved. The enemy was falling back, though not always cleanly. Some German commanders ignored Hitler's orders and retreated to save what men they could. Others obeyed and threw away lives by the hundreds. The pattern repeated town after town. Ordinary soldiers looked for exit signs. Fanatics looked for witnesses to kill. Patton, meanwhile, carried 2 forces inside him that often pulled in opposite directions. One was the old warrior's appetite for pursuit. He wanted the next objective, the next river, the next collapse. He believed the best mercy in war was to end it fast by hitting harder than the other side could endure. The second was his growing recognition that Germany at the end was not a single thing. There were still killers, ideologues, and men who would shoot civilians rather than admit defeat. But there were also exhausted families, wounded conscripts, and fathers writing forbidden truths to sons trapped in uniforms. Patton did not become a philosopher about this. He remained too impatient for that. Yet the letter sharpened something already forming in him. The German army could still fight, but German society itself was splitting under the weight of lies. That mattered in the next days more than anyone could have predicted. Intelligence officers began noting a change in the usefulness of surrendered Germans once the letter's message was echoed in leaflets and loudspeaker calls. Not everywhere, not with everyone, but enough to notice. Men from regular army units, especially older soldiers, surrendered with slightly less hesitation when the Americans framed surrender not as dishonor, but as survival, already sanctioned by home. Captured documents from other areas told similar stories: shortages, despair, resentment toward party officials, fear of the SS, prayers for the war to end before whole families disappeared. Patton did not think pamphlets won battles by themselves. He was too practical for that. But he did see that psychological collapse could save ammunition, time, and lives if exploited correctly. This fit a deeper truth about him. Many people saw Patton as a man driven only by aggression. In reality, he was driven by decision. He hated stagnation, hesitation, indecision, and ritualized slowness. Violence was often the tool he used to break those things, but information could do it too. So could fear, so could spectacle, so could speed. The letter gave him a clean line into the enemy's mind, and Patton never ignored a line like that. Several days later, as operations opened the way toward the Rhine, the story returned to him in another form. Prisoners taken from a different unit told interrogators that rumors were spreading among German ranks about American leaflets using a father's words. Nobody knew where the words came from, only that they sounded true. Some soldiers resented them, others carried them around in their heads like permission. Patton, when told, did not smile. He simply nodded and asked how many had surrendered in that sector before the last artillery concentration was even complete. The answer pleased him. It would be comforting to imagine that the letter turned Patton into a gentler commander after that. But that would be false. He did not slow down. He did not become less demanding. He did not start grieving the enemy in ways that changed his essential nature. Patton remained Patton. He drove his army mercilessly because he believed every day prolonged meant more graves. If anything, the letter confirmed his instinct that speed was not cruelty, but the shortest road through cruelty. The longer the Nazi state kept breathing, the more fathers would write desperate notes that never reached sons. Yet there was one area in which the letter did alter him, or at least reveal a hidden part of him. He became more alert to the difference between those still enforcing the lie and those trapped beneath it. That distinction did not make him politically subtle. He could be wildly blunt and deeply inconsistent in his views. But on the tactical level, it sharpened his judgment. Break the enforcers. Let the worn out come in. Don't turn every surrender opportunity into a massacre by pride. Don't waste American boys proving how hard you can be when the enemy is already hollow. That lesson stayed with him as the army pushed deeper into Germany and encountered scenes even Patton found hard to absorb. When American forces began uncovering camps, slave labor sites, and the evidence of what the Nazi system had actually built behind its speeches, any remaining romantic soldier-to-soldier respect Patton might have felt for the German war machine was poisoned by disgust. The clean distinction between fighting professionals and political evil became harder to hold in the face of pits, bodies, starvation, and industrial cruelty. Patton could handle battlefield death. He had built his whole emotional armor around it. Systematic death of the helpless struck a different nerve. It made the father's letter seem even more tragic. Some Germans had known the truth was rotten. Some had known and stayed quiet. Some had known and still obeyed. And boys like the courier had been pushed between home and the machine until one side killed them before the other could save them. Even so, Patton never lost the operational clarity the letter had given him on that muddy road. Germany would not be broken merely by shelling more towns. It would be broken by smashing the remaining centers of organized coercion while letting fear, exhaustion, and truth do the rest. Once he crossed the Rhine, that logic accelerated. Patton's forces surged into central Germany with the aggressive tempo that had made his reputation. Town after town fell faster than they might have months earlier. German formations surrendered in clumps. Roads filled with civilians, stragglers, wagons, and prisoners moving in opposite directions. The war had become not a contest of strength, but a race between collapse and command. Patton intended collapse to win. Through it all, the matter of the original letter remained unresolved. The courier's unit identity was eventually pieced together from tags, captured papers, and prisoner statements. His home district was narrowed down. A father's surname surfaced in a local registry from an area that had been heavily bombed. Whether the family home still stood was uncertain. Whether the father lived was even less clear. But Patton had not forgotten his order. If the letter could be returned, it would be. This detail might sound small, next to rivers crossed and cities taken, but that is precisely why it mattered. Great commanders are often described as if they float above details, seeing only arrows on maps. The reality is stranger. Some of the best commanders swing between scale and detail with almost violent speed. Patton could be talking in the morning about corps boundaries and by noon arguing over the condition of a single road. He could think about the war's whole sweep and then fixate on one prisoner's statement because it revealed the exact weakness he needed. The letter belonged in that category. It was a detail that opened onto a whole nation's collapse. One evening, after another long day of advances and briefings, an aide asked him indirectly why he had cared so much about that one paper. Patton gave the kind of answer only he could give, rough and simple and more revealing than he intended. Because, he said, the old man was telling the truth before the generals were. That was Patton in essence. He respected truth when it served action. Not abstract truth, actionable truth. The father had not written a philosophy. He had written a verdict. The war was lost. Save yourself if you can. Patton heard in that not sentiment, but timing. The enemy's home front had reached the same conclusion his tanks were forcing on the battlefield. Once those two things met, collapse became a matter of pressure. There was another reason too, though Patton did not say it aloud. He had spent his life trying to prove that war was the highest test of men, that courage and movement and iron will could cut through history like a blade. But here was a letter from a father, written in a dark house under air raid threat, reducing all ideology to one human command: live. No glory, no flags, no speeches, live. Even a man like Patton, who loved martial grandeur, could feel the brutal purity in that. In time, a packet of effects tied to the dead courier was prepared for transfer through channels meant to identify next of kin when possible. Whether the original letter ever reached the father's hands cannot be said with certainty. War and aftermath swallowed many such attempts. Offices moved, towns burned, families disappeared, records broke apart. But Patton had done what he could within the machinery available to him. He had turned the letter into intelligence, into psychological leverage, into a tactical adjustment that likely saved American and German lives in one town. And then he had tried to give it back to the private world from which it came. That is what made the moment so striking. Patton did not choose between ruthlessness and humanity. He used both, one after the other, each in the way he believed war allowed. First, he read the enemy's weakness and exploited it without hesitation. Then he honored the dead courier's last link to home. It was not softness. It was order. In Patton's mind, war destroyed enough already. If a useful truth could be pulled from the ruin and a personal truth preserved at the same time, then both should be done. For the men who served near him, the story outlived the town where it happened. They repeated it because it fit Patton and did not fit him at the same time. Of course he would use a dead enemy's letter to crack a defense. Of course he would change the attack in an instant if he sensed the enemy's nerves were gone. Of course he would move faster than the Germans expected. But the careful folding of the paper, the order to preserve the original, the refusal to laugh at a father begging his son not to die for lies, that part stayed with them too. War often flattens famous men into slogans. Patton has suffered that fate more than most. Old blood and guts. The profane tanker general, the glory hunter, the hard driver, all true, in pieces. But the battlefield on that March morning showed something else. He was a reader of men, not always a fair one, not always a wise one, but a fierce reader. He looked at the dead courier and saw not just a German casualty. He saw a message crossing two battlefields at once, the battlefield of guns and the battlefield inside Germany's own homes. Once he saw it, he acted. The town ahead fell faster because of that. Some Americans who might have died in doorways did not. Some Germans who might have been blasted in cellars came out instead. Some SS men who lived on coercion lost it. And one father's words, written in fear and love and bitter honesty, became for a few hours a sharper weapon in Patton's hands than another artillery barrage. In the end, that may be the hardest thing to understand about commanders like Patton. They are remembered for noise, tanks, speeches, profanity, momentum. But sometimes the real turn comes in silence. A folded letter, a dead boy in a ditch, a general staring toward a town and realizing the enemy is already splitting apart from the inside. The guns still matter. The armor still matters. The river still waits ahead. But suddenly the war is no longer only about what can be destroyed. It is about what truth has finally become impossible to suppress. Patton knew how to destroy, That part was never in doubt. What he did when he found that letter was something rarer. He listened to it. Then he used it to finish the fight faster. And when the fight was over, he tried to send it home.